know and love come to you like the sound of equipment being thrown from a moving van, the sound of dead cell phones and oil rigs, the sound of empty parking lots and school buses. They love to live and live to love. Ladies and gentlemen, Jesus Children of America, the White Stripes.
Hello, come on in. The water's great. My name is Ryan Schapp, and this is the Hardest Podcast. We are celebrating the entire White Stripes catalog, one song at a time on this podcast. How is everybody doing? Did you hear the big news? Warren Zevon got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yes, Werewolves in London, what a song. Come on. In all honesty, that was probably one of my favorite parts of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony, was David Letterman inducting Mr. Zevon, because goddamn are both of those two incredible individuals. Want to thank James and Paul from the Third Man podcast last week for coming on, doing a crossover episode for Hello Operator. Really enjoyed working with them, and I think there's room in this Jack White podcast universe to cross paths again, because I certainly would want to. Like I said, it felt like sometimes I was guesting on their show, and other times it felt like they were guesting on my show. I thought it was a perfect mix. Last week was a unique format, and one would say this week is a bit of a unique format. That being said, it's my show, and I can do whatever the hell I want whenever we do it. So there is no format. The format is whatever you listen to every Tuesday morning at 3:33 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. With so much coverage and emotion and reaction and celebration going into the White Stripes being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a lot of this episode is going to be devoted to that and discussing that. Now, I didn't want to steer completely away from the format that we have of discussing one song per episode, so I am going to discuss a song at the end of this episode. And I've made a few jokes about this song, or tongue-in-cheek lines that, when we get to this one. So I saw the perfect opportunity to cross this one off the list. So we're going to talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then we're going to talk about one of the tracks off the first White Stripes album, that being Slicker Drips. So it's Hall of Fame weekend and Slicker Drips here on the podcast. If you're new here, if this is your first time, if you've decided to climb aboard the red, white, and black wave that is the White Stripes in 2025, let me give you a little backstory about this podcast. There was no other podcast about the White Stripes. I felt I was the person for the job, and that's what I'm doing. We are doing one song a week. Every podcast episode is devoted to a song, and we discuss with a guest. And there's a big goal on this podcast, and that is to have Jack White come on and speak and do and discuss some of his songs, or discuss some of the White Stripes songs. The goal is to have Jack White on not once but 3 times. The loftiest of goals, but if we're talking about Jack White, you might as well, rule of 3s. So you might be asking yourself, well, what songs would you discuss with him? And that's the fun part. It is a complete and utter mystery. Nobody knows. People like to ask, and I encourage people to reach out and DM us or send us an email, DM us anywhere on social at hardestpodtopod, or email hardestpodtopod@gmail.com, and let us know what the mystery songs could be. So the fun part about this format is, as we continue to whittle down the list of White Stripes songs, you start to get a better idea. Well, maybe it's this one, maybe it's that one. Through process of elimination, it becomes a fun little game. And as time goes by, process of elimination and time going by, you're going to have a better idea of what it could be. But all these songs are chosen at random, except for those 3 mystery ones. So that's kind of how this show works. And if you want to support this show, go to buymeacoffee.com/hardestpodtopod. That link again is buymeacoffee.com/hardestpodtopod. You might be asking yourself, well, I think you're doing an okay job. Well, thank you. But if you think I'm doing a really good job, or you like the initiative, or you like the project and you want to help support it, that's how you can do it. You throw a few bucks that way, everything gets reinvested right back into the show. Normally, we have our call to action here. That's going to come a little bit later in the podcast. So this was naturally a big event for me as a not lifelong, but several decades long of being a fan of this band, being a fan of the White Stripes. And there was a few things that I was, the White Stripes were good at mystery. The White Stripes were good at playing off the unknowns. And with this event, there were so many unknowns. There was, would Jack White be there? Would Meg White be there? Would they perform? Would somebody else perform? Would Jack play with his touring band and just play the airline? Countless questions. I mean, I can remember back in a quote from a while back where Jack White was saying he would never wear red, white, and black again. Like that was retired. So going into it, there was a swirl of unknowns. And the night before the Hall of Fame ceremony, a friend of mine asked me if Meg White would appear. And I sat and thought about it. Quite frankly, I replied, I'm not even sure if Jack will appear. And I wasn't lying. Since it was announced that the White Stripes would enter the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, very little was said, and very little was promoted. It seemed like the Rock Hall had access to a couple of promotional photos and not much else. Very little was said by Jack outside of the typical thank you for inducting us posts and comments. And listen, the Rock Hall is a unique place. It represents all that is good with music, celebrating its history, its innovators, and the biggest and brightest artists of all eras. But it also represents the worst about music: elitism, cynicism, and the gatekeepers of all gatekeeping. Old heads who think rock music achieved perfection in 1973, and those who think real music was last made in Seattle in the early 90s. In one breath, the Rock Hall is stuck in boomer Rolling Stone ideology, but in the other, it is evolving, growing, and doing what it can to celebrate the most integral artists of their eras. I could totally understand why Jack or Meg wouldn't want their kind of punk rock art project from Southwest Detroit to be fawned over by the elites. The White Stripes didn't need to go into the Hall of Fame. They have their flowers. They have arguably the most recognizable and popular song of the 21st century in Seven Nation Army. I've said countless times on this podcast before, the critics love the Stripes. They were propped up by corporate rock journalism, though never wavered from being their true, authentic selves. While they didn't need to go in, we all kind of wanted them to go in. The word want kept coming to mind as I tried to sum up the White Stripes Hall of Fame weekend. Jack and Meg were so smart and even calculated with their careers. The duo picked and chose both their labels and the terms of their record deals. They left the business owning their masters and have never had a Beatlesque controversy regarding their publishing rights. In my opinion, they are in a place where the White Stripes can do exactly what they want. They don't need to do anything. There isn't an unpopular decision they need to make for the good of the record label or the merchandise sales. They get to do what they want. And with that, it felt like they got what they wanted. Iggy Pop inducted the band in the most perfect, goofy Iggy Pop way, and as silly as he was twice as real, authentic in his punk rock sensibilities. Jack White did not need to appear at the ceremony. The band could have pulled a Van Halen and nobody show up except for two people who weren't even in the band anymore. They didn't need to appease the Rock Hall or any promoters for any upcoming nostalgia tour. Jack White appeared because he wanted to. And Meg White? Well, maybe Meg chose to continue prioritizing her mental health. Or maybe it was her privacy. Having been out of the public eye for 20 years and being someone who craved that privacy, perhaps she's been able to walk around in plain sight, living the comfortable life she wants. And that's what we want. Did Jack get something he didn't know he wanted? As Andre 3000 teared up talking about the importance of little rooms and the art that begins in little rooms, you have to wonder what Jack was thinking. Arguably the greatest rap duo of all time was sharing praise for the White Stripes' ethos and creative vision as outlined in what continues to be one of the White Stripes' most important songs, Little Room. That being said, I think Jack wanted Meg to be there. He understands why she wasn't, but that doesn't mean he didn't want her to get all of the accolades she deserves. As time goes by and I continue to read comments, new and old, from Jack about his bandmate Meg, he was insanely proud of her. The shyest, quietest woman in the world took on an instrument she knew nothing about, excelled, proved everyone wrong, and was the inspiration for a generation of musicians. Jack seems proud, but also protective of her. And rightfully so. As his eyes welled up, alone on stage, reading his prepared speech, his notes from Meg, and the letter he didn't get around to sending her, it was clear that Jack was off his game. Maybe it was nerves, maybe it was being front and center with no guitar to hide behind, but Jack wasn't as comfortable as he could have been. Sure, it's a hard spot to be on. On a pedestal, in front of the entire rock and roll establishment, being praised for your work. But it wasn't just his work. Meg White was everything that made the White Stripes special, unique and timeless, but she wasn't there. And that's okay, because we can't always get what we want. That was my written, pre-prepared essay that I thought off the top of the dome before recording. I had a few things swirling around in my mind about their induction and the ceremony, and there's still a lot to talk about from that ceremony. So, in a very exciting twist, the assistant editorial producer of this podcast, who also is known as the wife of the host of the Hardest Podcast to Podcast, Miss Amanda Schultz, has joined me by my side to discuss the induction a little bit more. We're talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes, we are.
And the White Stripes were inducted. Iggy Pop inducted them. Jack White was there. Meg White wasn't. A unique array of artists performed some of their important songs. And just overall, I'd say it was a pretty special event.
Yes, it was. Yeah. I think it was very cool. I learned a lot about actually the White Stripes during that whole broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very excited to get your take on it because we haven't really discussed it in depth.
I felt like I watched it like a sporting event where there was just so much because you didn't know how it was going to end. It was all suspense. So when it was over, I kind of leaned back and just kind of needed to, compose myself and take a breather.
Well, yeah. I mean, my first question for you is that obviously everyone was hoping for a Meg White appearance or even the tiniest sliver of hope for a surprise reunion performance. Walk me through the 90 minutes between when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame official Instagram account inadvertently captioned a photo implying that the White Stripes would be performing and the end of the performance.
Deep down, I knew. Deep down, I maybe cynically, I was like, she won't be there, and that's fine. But when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Instagram account posted a photo of Jack looking outstanding in his red suit jacket or his red tuxedo jacket, the bio said the write up on the post said, tune into the Hall of Fame on Disney Plus to see the White Stripes perform. And yeah, the adrenaline starts cooking. You just start, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? I immediately reply and say, admin, have you phrased this incorrectly? Because that one comment was the exact opposite of probably what the majority of people were expecting. So I'm like, either it was just some young punk social media intern that doesn't understand
the gravitas of that sentence.
Exactly. So I think that it added a little what could happen, what's around this door. And then as soon as just Jack walked up, I'm like, okay, it's okay. It's fine.
I don't know. I think that would have felt very un-White Stripes, wouldn't it?
The whole event is very un-White Stripes.
Well, exactly. But then, of course, for them to make a big deal out of it and have that be a big selling point of why people should tune in feels very disingenuous.
I'd agree with you.
So it felt like if it was going to happen, it would be this sort of
Yeah.
surprise situation. Were you holding your breath for the whole 90 minutes?
Yes. No, what? I breathed, inhaled and exhaled. No, I don't know. Like, it's a very conflicting thing. Like, I would have been happy with whatever decision they made, and I think that if they like didn't show up or sent a video, or Jack sent a video in like his studio or something and said thank you for this, I like, great. Like, that's what I think of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right.
Like, it's the most corporate, bland, like as authentic as it is, it's twice as inauthentic, and like, that every time you talk about it, it's like, well, it's, what are they doing? How do people get in? How do these elites decide it? Like, it's a really dumb cloak and dagger. So if they were to be like, the hell with that, I'd be like, of course they would. But then when they do decide to acknowledge it, you go, well, I want them to get this level of flowers and this much of accolades. And like, then you're like, well, they deserve this. So you're like, you're in both, you got one foot in each camp, and you're trying to determine what suits you, the individual, the best. So it's really dumb. And it's very clear with a band like this, and my relationship with this band. Relationship is a very hell of a stretched out term. My affinity for the band, I'm like, how do I want to feel? How do I want them to be celebrated? Because I've, spent so many years like, this is my favorite band. I've got to protect them, even though it's the last thing I need to do. I need to root for them and sing their praise and let the world know that what they're doing is good, not bad.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Can you handle the fact that in the same year, the two things that are from your wildest dreams were being discussed? Actually, even in the same month, that the Seattle Mariners making an actual legitimate World Series run, and a possible, maybe somewhat likely happening of the White Stripes reuniting in a public forum.
Yeah.
How would you move on from 2025 if either of those things had happened in the same month?
Listen, 2024 was very hard to top, dear.
Oh, excellent.
But
good answer.
It's special when the things that you love, or the things you're passionate about, or the things that you really care about, just become bigger than you could imagine. And you just, I don't know. The way I like things, I'm quite protective of them, and I take that. Don't make fun of my baseball team, and don't make fun of my band. And then it's like, well, nobody is. I'm like, wait, they're good? Oh yeah, they are good. You see, I told you.
See? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the most wonderful things about this podcast, but also about you in general, is that you really love the things that you love. And that was one of the things that stood out to me in Jack's acceptance speech, when he's like, get off your phone and get passionate about something. And I was thinking about this podcast and how lovely and kind of full circle that is, to see somebody who is telling people to get passionate about something and saying people want to listen to somebody who's passionate about something.
Absolutely.
And that's what this show is in my mind. So if there's any new listeners that have stumbled here from exposure to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and are kind of curious about the White Stripes for the first time, what do you, as an impassioned listener, want to tell them?
I've, not to brag, but I've had a couple of clips on Instagram go viral lately, and I think they're kind of showcasing the White Stripes in their kind of purest form. And 90% of the interactions, mainly the comments, are positive and encouraging. And they're like, I like this band. And the other 10% are negative. They're stone throwing, or they're skeptical. So if you are discovering this band, or you like this band and you are listening to this podcast to get more of an understanding of this band, or just want to learn more, or just want to hear what somebody who's really passionate about, or people that are passionate about this band, for those for the first time, like, this is an authentic band. These are two authentic people that chose to represent themselves the way they wanted. It wasn't to adhere to trends or what was the style at the time. They stood out for the right reasons, and you can think that, well, everything behind them was calculated with the colors and the presentation. The presentation was very calculated, but my God, does the music and the art not match the presentation? And that's why they stand out so well in this among the integral members of rock history. So park the cynicism at the door if you're getting into this band, and believe in them.
I like that. I think it's a good intro. And I think you've referenced it in the podcast before, of the whole like kind of push and pull of their like gimmick, and how inauthentic it is in theory to have a gimmick, but it really feels like that gimmick is the platform with which they put forward their very authentic music. And that's really interesting.
Jack was always afraid, in earlier quotes, it's like, last thing he wanted to be was a white boy blues hammer band. And he's like, because that's the music that him and Meg loved. And it's like, if we can have these childlike personas and the unique colors and the swirls, all of these distracting methods, we can get away with playing the blues. And he says that tongue in cheek, but I'm also like, yeah, you need to kind of have that, or else you just look like a bar band that's, playing blues music, white boy blues music, and nobody kind of really cares about that.
Well, yeah, and I think it's like this ceremony was also a very interesting use case for that theory of like branding and setting a specific context, because Jack showing up in the red suit with the white tie and, the black accessories was a very telling thing. And it was showing that he is there in a specific context representing one specific project of his lifetime of work. Mm-hmm. And that's, I was thinking of that when I saw him show up in the white jacket. And I didn't know actually until you mentioned it earlier about he said he'd never wear red again.
Yeah. And I think that both Jack and Meg are very firm believers in like art is living and breathing, and both of them are very kind of anti-nostalgia, and the way Jack represents his White Stripes songs, he kind of nothing about him or the band is a rehash, and I think that was the best way, for a group being inducted that isn't going to perform, and half of them isn't going to be there, without being a rehash or kind of something that isn't authentic or a real representation of the group. Simply wearing the colors pays off, and it does provide that, and that aesthetic and that look and those kind of choices to only wear and be presented in those colors, that decision's made 20 whatever years ago, and then cue them going into the Hall of Fame, and all of a sudden that decision to only have those colors, the decision to wear them makes up for all this other things. Like, it's that much more impactful. Like, it's not like he kept using those colors for his solo career or for Third Man Records. Like, it sets everything apart, and then when it comes time to discuss them or present them, it is that much more impactful.
Obviously there was a lot of love in the room for Meg. I really liked in Iggy Pop's intro that he stressed really kind of emphatically that she played the drums for the benefit of her band. Mm-hmm. And it made me think back to that quote from Ali Sheldon when we had her on the show that I really love, talking about like the audacity that this woman had to just play really simply, and how much that transformed the band. I couldn't help but notice too in the 21 Pilots performance that there was a lot of extra drum fills. Obviously, in a tribute performance, some bands are going to try and stick more true to form. Some are going to try and make it their own. But my take on that was like, oh, interesting. That's a great example of somebody doing more and Meg doing less, and that being her thing. I'm curious what you thought of that.
Well, 21 Pilots did a very good job. There are a few things I really liked about their performance. One was, we've talked about it in the show, and Jack's talked about it, but like in the White Stripes, he made things more difficult than they needed to be. And so there was a part in 21 Pilots performance where the drummer, I don't know their names, I apologize. The drummer got off and went to the some sort of electronic device, like the drum pad or whatever. And then the guy playing bass ran over to the piano, and he sang upward. And those were like, immediately I'm like, oh, they have recreated a lot of the placement of the equipment on a White Stripes stage back in the day. It was uncomfortable. You know, Jack's back would be to Meg. You know, he would have to communicate through a mirror. And I really liked that about them. And that stood out. And then when it came time for them to go back to their instruments, the singer, the guy playing bass, had to run.
It was a noticeable run.
And I was like, that stood out to me the most, that I'm like, these guys got the assignment. And when it was all done, the song's over, and we had to listen back a couple times, but I'm fairly certain the drummer said, Jack and Meg, that was really difficult, or that's hard. Because that song is a great example of keeping it simple makes it that much more huge. And this is no knock to anybody that covers that song, but it was affirming. It's a song that it's almost impossible to cover or do,
especially
well,
as a two-piece.
As a two-piece, and he was playing bass.
Well, yeah, the red elephant in the room is that it was covered on a bass. Isn't that like sacrilege?
Well, it's sacrilege because only the riff is like bass notes with the digitech whammy making the octaves go down. So I'm like, okay, it sounds fine during the verses, but there's so much depth and sheer volume of the song in the chorus that just wasn't there in 21 Pilots performance. But it was unique. I really appreciated how they took on a nearly impossible task, and they put a unique spin on it. I really liked the abridged part where they switched instruments, which was what the White Stripes did throughout their live shows. So they did a very, very good job representing the band's legacy. And I'm like, yeah, the song wasn't the best, but like everything else around it made it special. So like I think back only fondly of it.
Yeah, and it's known to be a very difficult song to cover, especially in a context like this. And how do you not have that song included in the performance in some way? Like you said, it's the most widely known rock song of the 21st century, or maybe song ever. Like,
you have to play it. And I don't know, it was just a shining example of like, go back and watch them play at the 2004 Grammys, when Outkast, hilariously enough, stole Album of the Year. But just watch them play it live, and there's the mix of band members and instruments and the way they've chosen to perform them seemingly can't be replicated, and that's what makes music and art so special.
What is the significance of Iggy Pop's relationship with the White Stripes? Like, he told the story of how he met Jack at that Coachella performance. He picked him up. Yeah. What is?
The Stooges,
I don't know anything about it.
Okay, so the Stooges, Iggy Pop is the lead singer of the Stooges. They're an important band from Detroit in the late 60s. Jack White's favorite album of all time is Funhouse by the Stooges. He thinks it is the quintessential rock and roll album and the most Detroit sounding album ever. So when we discuss songs from the first album on here, he's like, he wanted to make that Detroit album, that gritty, that raw, that, hard working kind of uncomfortable music. He wanted to make his own Funhouse, and the White Stripes did that with their first album. So he loves Iggy Pop. He loves the Stooges. They're a huge influence on him, and their approach to music. And he's just Jack White's just lucky enough to have befriended his idols, whether that's Iggy, whether that's Bob Dylan. He's played with Ringo a few times. He's the way he's chosen to perform his art and carry himself has allowed him to resonate well enough with his idols that they bring him on in. And Iggy Pop was the perfect individual to induct him.
Yeah. Okay. I figured. I mean, it was clear there was references to Detroit and that sound, and then Jack calls him Uncle Iggy near the end. So
Iggy Pop's old as hell. He's Grandpa Iggy.
Oh yeah. Well, and how old is Jack?
50.
Okay. The other person that appeared in the video was John C. Reilly, who I'm a big fan of. Yeah. What's the connection there?
I believe that started where Jack White played the role of Elvis in the movie Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, which was a parody of all the biopics in the 2000s. And they've just kind of been nearby in the same kind of universe ever since. And so at Jack's 50th birthday this year, he went to a Detroit Tigers game, and John C. Reilly threw out the first pitch and then sang happy birthday from the pitcher's mound up to Jack and the crowd. So they're kind of running buddies. But I believe it all started from Walk Hard, which is the best movie ever. And that is a worlds colliding of Jack White playing the role of Elvis in regards to me and my father. So
no kidding. Well, yeah. And he talked about seeing them at a smaller show in Detroit. So I was like, oh, maybe it's one of those things where they go way back, and I don't know. But John C. Reilly gives off old timey vibes to me too. So I just assumed maybe they are pals and they both like old timey things.
Yeah.
Very good. I really loved in the clips in the super pack or whatever that they played, where there's a quote from what's clearly early days, because Jack and Meg both look very young, and he says, "I don't think this band is ever going to be that big. We don't write songs that are going to be top 40 hits," which is obviously interesting in the context of them being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but also very interesting thinking again back to Seven Nation Army that they don't write top 40 hits, yet they have this massive song that seems to resonate no matter what context you put it in. Does the scale of the band surprise you in the same way that it clearly surprises Jack as a fan after all of these years?
I think there was a time where the White Stripes, late in their career in 2007, they went as far as we're not going to play Seven Nation Army anymore. It went from it became this huge encompassing thing, and I think they had a complicated relationship with it, where he would kind of it was that's just my hit song, that's no big deal,
right?
And I don't think he liked, or I don't know if it was but he clearly was uncomfortable about the scope of the song and the impact on it. It was starting when the White Stripes were still together and performing, but in the late 2000s, after they kind of took their hiatus, that's when the song became a soccer chant and took on a life of its own. And I think he really began to warm up to it. Keep in mind, Jack White also took 5 years off from playing that song because, their last White Stripes gig was summer 2007, and his first solo gigs were, as a solo artist, were in early 2012. And I think he kind of had that time to, okay, this is not the only thing that defines me. People like, a lot of the art I'm creating, past and present, is receptive. People are receptive and appreciative of it. But I think there was a worry that he's like, I'm just going to be the Seven Nation Army guy, or we're just going to be the Seven Nation Army band. And the song doesn't sound like any other White Stripes song. So it was like this weird anomaly, even when Elephant came out, where I'm like, okay, well, that's the song that the dullards on the radio have chosen, but I know what the real White Stripes are.
Right.
And then as like 20 years go by, you go, man, that's such a badass song. It's intense and suspenseful and just like beats you over the head, but then is so calm and quiet. And there's nothing to it in most of it. So like, it's just a unique song. And like, I think that surprises him. And I think those quotes from that clip were taken from a doc they did about Detroit music. And that was pre White Blood Cells. So I think like, yeah, that was how they felt. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we actually have a really good album, and oh my God, it's resonating. Okay, maybe we can do this. So,
well, and it's funny just listening to you say all that. What I hear out of it is that you, as a fan, like such a deeply rooted fan, have actually kind of a similar complicated relationship to that song being as big as it is. Like maybe similar to the way that Jack and Meg felt at the time, and Jack maybe still feels now, of the like, well, does it get away from all the principles of what I love about what they're doing with this project of the White Stripes to have a hit at this scale and to have fans connect with the band at this scale, when like that's kind of actually like contrary to a lot of what you do love about them, but also at the end of the day, this is a damn good song.
I think that if you grew up or came up in a time of like, I don't know, jaded cynicism, you'd be like, well, that's the popular song, it's not as good as the other ones. Mm-hmm. And then now
I'm a real fan, I know.
And like, thank God the youths of today have killed irony. The millennials killed irony, and now it doesn't exist.
Yes.
And now it's just like, things are good.
Well, things are either good or they're cringe. And everybody's afraid to do anything in between. And
there's nothing cringe about Seven Nation Army.
No. The two kind of obviously like ends of the spectrum of the White Stripes catalog, one being Seven Nation Army and then the other one being Little Room, having kind of a big significance in the ceremony. We haven't really talked about the We're Gonna Be Friends yet, which I loved and can't wait to talk about that too. But I want to go to Little Room because this was one of the best, like more emotional moments that Jack like very lightly touched on in his speech, but Andre 3000 bringing that up in his and getting very emotional. Tell me about what you felt watching that.
I think that's like one of the coolest clips, music related clips I may ever see. Make no bones about it, like Outkast is like one of they are the best like rap duo ever. They are one of the most important pioneers of rap and hip hop, and they are so good. And Andre 3000 and Jack have a lot in common. They are just pure artists through and through. And I think what was special about that there's so much that was special about that clip. But what was really special about it, and what's right and what's wrong with the Hall of Fame, is that there is this divide about what is rock and roll and there should be a rap and hip hop Hall of Fame, and like, a divide. There is a divide with the music, with the purists or the rock fans that they don't want rap, blah, 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 whatever. You can chalk that up if you want. What was so perfect about that clip is that if you knew nothing about rap or hip hop or the culture around it, you would see this big entourage, Outkast, huge entourage, and the big jackets and the great jewelry and like the outfits, like they stood out. And you would be like, I do not have anything in common. I don't resonate with that culture or that approach to art or that music. And then for him, for Andre to get teared up about talking about, the little rooms, and you're like, okay, there's a lot more in common with that type of music and this type of music and that approach and this approach. And maybe I should not be so close-minded or so judgmental. So that's the biggest thing I took away. It's like you have these hip-hop fucking juggernauts, and they're like, man, we started the way as the White Stripes, and like nobody else, and everyone's like, yep, like couldn't agree more. And so I think that was the most special for it, and that's what I took away and what I hope others take away.
Yeah, and maybe there'll be some Outkast fans that are being exposed to the White Stripes for the first time and hearing that reference and being like, well, what's up with Little Room? And I mean, I didn't know of that song at all before the episode on it, and it is one of my favorites. And like the core concept of that song is such a great thing, and so I think maybe that'll bring some people into White Stripes from the other side of the table if they've only really been exposed to Seven Nation Army.
Yeah.
And yeah, how profound some of these kind of tiny other songs are that were never thought they could leave that little room or that album and be in such a profound space like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. You mentioned We Are Gonna Be Friends.
Yes, let's talk about that. I loved it. I thought it was like a very pure tribute performance. What did you think?
I think it was great, and that's a very important song. That's the last song the White Stripes performed live.
Last ever?
Yeah. It was on the final episode of the Late Night with Conan O'Brien. And much like that performance, it was performed by two people, both playing guitars, because Meg White played guitar, and so did Jack, and literally Jack taught her how to play guitar like at soundcheck.
Amazing.
So it was special. It's cool. I think it was just...
Wait, was that announced like beforehand as their last performance? I don't know the lore.
No, it was, they took hiatus in 2007. They performed in 2009. And then they announced that they were done about a year out because Jack had a solo album coming out and he didn't want any awkwardness or just confusion. So I think it was cool as hell that Olivia Rodrigo is, the Zoomer White Stripes champion. I thought they were cool as hell. I liked the, Feist is a millennial acoustic darling, and Olivia Rodrigo is like one of the coolest, younger musicians right now, and just like so consistent. So just to see them come together and perform a song as beautiful as that one is, I thought they killed it. I thought they were the real highlight in terms of tribute performances, and it was special. It was special to see two artists on that level celebrate the band like that.
Yeah, and I think they really let the song be the star, which is very cool for like arguably like absolutely one of the top three like touring pop stars right now, probably artists across all genres in terms of popularity, to have somebody like Olivia Rodrigo doing that and not needing to like make a point to really make it her own. Like you can tell how much she reveres the band and that song through her comments in the clips, but also the performance. I thought the like simplicity of it was amazing, and their vocals blended so well. I noticed, and maybe this is just the producer nerd in me. There's obviously some like sound issues throughout the show, people ripping out their in-ears, but I'm not going to talk about that. The other producer moment in me was noticing that Jack chose to use the cue cards and not the teleprompter. Is this another example of him churning his own butter?
That's him churning his own butter, and he posted a photo on Instagram where they were numbered. He wrote the numbers in the corner not to get mixed up, and I think that's just there's a level of realism. Like, you have to think about what you're seeing on the paper in front of you. When you have the teleprompter just going up, you just kind of like, you're going through the motions. It's muscle memory. You're just reacting to it. So he had a few moments where he was uncomfortable and vulnerable, and I think it was a classic butter churn, and I think it suited him perfectly.
Yeah, I like that. I feel it definitely brings that sense of authenticity to accepting awards like this. Like, there's nothing that says spontaneity like reading off a teleprompter. Felt very genuine.
Thank you for coming on after I sprung this on you earlier. I thought you did. You added a great dynamic to this episode.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you for having me. It was fun to make my in front of the mic debut. And
you will hear Amanda in a episode probably early in the new year, where her claim to fame is.
Oh, excellent.
But she will share the mic.
I can't wait. Oh, do I get like a mysterious lead in, like the 3 secret Jack White songs? Now there's a secret Amanda Schultz song.
Don't think of yourself like that.
Okay, I'll go back behind the mic.
Okay, that was Amanda. That was our assistant editorial producer. Her title is on a sliding scale. And it's been that title for a while. So I might have to have a team meeting about that. Let's go to our call to action. I want everybody to hit pause on this episode, go to their streaming platform of choice, go find the White Stripes' first album. It's an easy to find one. It's called The White Stripes. Go to track 15. It's 91 seconds long. It is Slicker Drips. Go take a listen, and we'll discuss it after the break. Okay, Slicker Drips. I've made a joke about this for a little while, that tongue-in-cheek, when it comes time to talk about this song. You don't know how much there will be. Well, there's not too much of this. I'm not going to lie. This is probably the most... It's unforgettable, but there's just not a lot there. It's track 15 on a 17-track album. It's 91 seconds in length. It's quite short. I remember listening to Striped and listening to some articles around that time that it kind of felt like Jack White would never get into the studio again. This is his one chance to record these songs. So whatever ideas he had, he brought them to the table, and he, got them onto tape, got them into, got them into the world for others to hear. Not too much is known about this song. It was recorded in Ghetto Recorders in the Cast Corridor, Detroit, by the old Jim Diamond. Here's some lyrics. They're looking at me, nowhere to go, and what they're saying, just don't know. Floor below me, a ceiling above, and I'm in the middle with nobody to love, nobody to love, nobody to love, nobody to love. They're looking at me, nowhere to go. I hear what they're saying, I just don't know. With a ceiling below, a ceiling above. You're in the middle with nobody to love, nobody to love. It's dripping in early White Stripes aesthetic. Very simple drums, just playing along with the riff, and maybe that sounds like a negative, but it's just heavy, pounding drums. So Jack's playing this kind of beating downward riff, and Meg's right there with him. I think the bridge is pretty sick. It's got a blues riff on it. a little Hello Operator-y, but it works for me. And then the song picks up. It gets faster and faster and faster. The tempo and it just shoots right up, and that kind of makes the song stand out because if it would be a little bit of a slog if it just kept at that same tempo through the whole thing, but it builds and builds and builds and builds. And then I think that's a great representation of the White Stripes live show and their live legacy, where you think a song's about to end, and then Jack cues up Meg, and they add on 3 more bars, or they keep going faster and faster and faster. Earlier in the episode, I referenced them playing Seven Nation Army at the Grammys in 2004. Well, they also go into Death Letter, and then God damn, does that song get faster and faster and faster and faster. Just a great example of showing the chemistry and the unique bond that this band has. So there's not a lot to know about Slicker Drips. It was only performed 7 times live, and it hasn't been performed since December 2000. And it's performed so few times, I'm going to read the venues. May 21st, 1998, Frankie's Inner City in Toledo, Ohio. October 23rd, 1998, the Gold Dollar in Detroit. November 27th, 1998, the Magic Bag in Ferndale, Michigan. September 27th, 1999, at the 40 Watt Club in Athens, Georgia. That is an important venue. Athens is a very important rock town. Lawrence, Kansas on June 27th, 2000 at the Replay Lounge. And then about 3 hours away in Seattle, Washington on December 2nd in the year 2000, they play it at the Sit and Spin. And the last time it was performed was December 7th, 2000, one day before my birthday. But one day before my 13th birthday, they performed it in San Francisco, California at the bottom of the hill. I remember hearing a White Stripes recording or bootleg back in the day. I think it was from San Francisco, probably White Blood Cells tour. And I remember Jack saying to the crowd that San Francisco was the first city that ever loved the White Stripes. And that that pops into my head a couple times a week, I'm not going to lie. Not Detroit, not London, England, and certainly not Toledo. We're going with San Francisco. Very good town. I've been there once. So honestly, that is Slicker Drips. Some of these songs are going to have an hour plus talked about them. Others, not so much. And I didn't want to waste a guest on Slicker Drips. Now, I know there's somebody out there. If you're out there and Slicker Drips is one of your favorite songs or your favorite, let me know. I just want to let you know that there's no knock to Slicker Drips. There's just not a lot of meat on the bone. Okay. That was Slicker Drips. That was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That was our assistant editorial producer. Another unique episode, another change in format, but let me assure you that we are coming back next week with a classic. A returning guest, a conversation I had that I really enjoyed. We're back for another installment. Go to buymeacoffee.com/hardestpodtopod if you like this show and want to support it. And also go rate and review the podcast on your streaming platform of choice. And speaking of the podcast, The Hardest Podcast, a Podcast is hosted and produced by Ryan Schapp. Artwork by Caitlin Likely. Amanda Schultz is our assistant editorial producer. And Mike Noble is our gator.